Story 1. Emma. Our first story is about a young woman named Emma, living alone in a small New York apartment. Every night, she had the same recurring dream. She was walking down a long, dark hallway. The dream was so repetitive, so vivid, it started to feel more like a memory than a fantasy. One night, Emma woke up with a jolt, but something was wrong. Her room felt different, colder. She wasn't in her bed. She was standing in the very same hallway from her dream. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the sound of her own frantic breathing and faint, echoing footsteps somewhere behind her. Panic set in. She ran towards what she thought was her apartment door, her fingers fumbling for the handle. She pushed it open, expecting to find the safety of her bedroom. Instead, the endless, dark hallway stretched out before her, just like in the dream. A heavy breathing sound grew louder right behind her ear. She whipped her head around, but no one was there. Suddenly, she gasped, her eyes flying open. She was back in her bed, drenched in cold sweat, her heart pounding against her ribs. It was just a nightmare, but as her eyes adjusted to the dark, she saw it. A tall, slender shadow standing at the far end of the room, perfectly still, and her bedroom door, which she always locked, was slightly ajar. Story 2. Next, we meet a young couple, Jack and Lisa, who had just moved into a charming old house in the suburbs. Their excitement quickly turned to unease. Every night, just after midnight, Lisa would hear faint whispers. At first, she dismissed it as the house settling, or maybe just her imagination running wild, but then, Jack started hearing them too. The whispers grew louder, clearer, night after night. A chilling message repeated over and over. Leave, before it's too late. Shadows would dart across the corners of their vision whenever they dared to open their eyes in the dark. The feeling of being watched became unbearable. One night, Jack was jolted awake by a sudden, intense cold. He turned and saw Lisa standing beside the bed, her body rigid, staring blankly at the wall. Her lips were moving, but no sound came out. When he reached out to touch her shoulder, her skin was like ice. At that exact moment, faint, eerie laughter echoed from the ceiling above them. The next morning, terrified, they searched the house from top to bottom. Behind a loose panel in their closet, they found a hidden door. It led to a small, dusty basement they never knew existed. The room was filled with strange, unsettling objects, and the walls were covered in frantic scribbles. One message, written larger than the rest, read, "They are watching you while you sleep." Story 3. Mark. Our final story is about Mark, a programmer who loved testing out new technology. He downloaded a new sleep tracking app that claimed it could not only analyze sleep patterns, but also record and replay dreams. For the first few nights, everything seemed normal. The app showed him charts and data, and the dream recordings were fuzzy but harmless. But then, things started to get weird. The dreams recorded in the app didn't match what he remembered dreaming. The app's recordings showed distorted, nightmarish versions of his own house, filled with lurking shadows and terrifying figures he'd never seen before. One night, Mark woke up suddenly. He glanced at his phone, which was running the app on his nightstand. The screen showed a live feed of him sleeping in his bed, but he wasn't alone. A tall figure was standing right next to him. His blood ran cold. He shot up and looked. There was nothing there. He was completely alone in the room. He looked back at his phone. The figure was still there, but now it was closer, leaning over the bed. Every time he blinked, looking from the empty room to the phone screen, the figure on the screen got closer and closer to his sleeping form. In a panic, Mark grabbed the phone and deleted the app. He spent the rest of the night with the lights on. The next morning, exhausted but relieved, he checked his smartwatch. The app's icon was still there. And on the screen, a new message was blinking. "We are always awake with you." Story for Mia was thrilled to finally move into her own dorm room. It was old, a little worn, but it was hers. The first night, She noticed something odd. As the clock ticked past midnight, a profound silence settled over the room. It wasn't just quiet, it was an absolute void of sound. The distant traffic, the hum of the building, even the rustle of leaves outside her window all gone. It was like being inside a vacuum-sealed jar. At first, she found it peaceful, a welcome escape from the city's constant noise. But after a few nights, the silence started to feel heavy, oppressive. That's when she first heard them, footsteps, slow, deliberate, and impossibly close. They shuffled across the wooden floor, right next to her bed. Her heart would pound in her chest, but when she'd flick on the light, the room was always empty. Her roommate, Sarah, slept soundly in the next bed, oblivious. When Mia asked her about it, Sarah just shrugged. "I don't hear anything. You're probably just dreaming." But Mia knew she wasn't. The footsteps grew bolder, sometimes circling her bed for what felt like hours. She started dreading the night, forcing herself to stay awake until exhaustion claimed her. One night, she woke up with a gasp, her body drenched in a cold sweat. The silence was absolute, but the room wasn't empty. Standing around her bed were shadows, tall and distorted, their forms barely visible in the faint moonlight. They were just standing there, watching her. Pure terror seized her. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. It was as if the silence had stolen her voice. The shadows began to inch closer, their dark shapes leaning over her. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying for morning. The next day, sunlight streamed into the room. Everything was normal. Sarah was already gone for her morning class. Mia felt a wave of relief wash over her. It must have been a nightmare, a really vivid one. She sat up, her eyes landing on the notebook she kept on her knit-stand. Her breath hitched. Scrawled across the open page, in her own distinct handwriting, were 5 words she had no memory of writing. They wait until you fall asleep. Story 5. Alex, a software engineer, had always had vivid dreams, but lately they had taken a disturbing turn. Every night, he would dream of a man who looked exactly like him, living out his life in his own apartment. The doppelganger would wake up in his bed, make coffee in his kitchen, and sit at his desk. Alex dismissed it as a strange manifestation of work stress. Just his brain processing the daily routine. But then things got weird. The dream started predicting his day. One night, he dreamt his doppelganger spilled a full cup of coffee on his keyboard. The next morning, as Alex reached for his mug, his elbow bumped it, sending hot coffee all over his desk. Another night, he dreamt the man was on a video call, and a colleague unexpectedly criticized his project. The next day, the exact same conversation happened. It was unnerving, as if his dreams were a script for his waking life. The fear truly set in when the dream figure seemed to become aware of him. In his dreams, the doppelganger would sometimes stop and stare into the distance, right at the spot where Alex, the observer, felt he was standing. One night, Alex dreamt he was in bed, asleep. He watched himself toss and turn, and then he saw it. The dream version of himself slowly sat up, turned its head, and reached a hand out from the bed, as if trying to grab the dreamer. Alex woke up with a jolt, his heart hammering against his ribs. The room was dark, but he wasn't alone. Sitting at the edge of his bed, silhouetted against the window, was the figure from his dreams. It didn't move, it just sat there, watching him. Alex scrambled out of bed, fumbled for the light switch, and flooded the room with light. The figure was gone. He didn't sleep another second in that apartment. He packed a bag and left, crashing on a friend's couch. A few months later, trying to move on with his life, he was scrolling through social media. He stopped on a photo tagged at a location near his old building. It was a random street shot, but in the background, standing in front of his old apartment, was a man. A man who looked identical to him, smiling faintly at the camera. Story 6. David was a single father doing his best to raise his 7-year-old daughter, Lily. They lived in a quiet suburban house, the kind where everyone knows their neighbors. Their peaceful life was disrupted when Lily started sleepwalking. David would find her standing in the hallway or her own room, her eyes wide open but completely vacant. She would whisper to someone he couldn't see. He'd gently guide her back to bed, but she remained unresponsive until morning, when she would have no memory of it. He tried not to worry, telling himself it was just a phase. But then other strange things started happening. Lily began arranging small objects by her bed at night: a toy soldier, a polished stone, a bottle cap in peculiar, almost ritualistic patterns. One night, David was in his study when he heard a whisper drift from her room. It wasn't Lily's voice, it was deeper, raspy, and it whispered his name. David ... double quotes. He rushed to her room, but she was fast asleep, the objects on her nightstand arranged in a new, unsettling design. He grew more and more anxious, his own sleep becoming fragmented. He'd wake at the slightest sound, listening for the whispers. One night, a primal sense of dread pulled him from his sleep. He felt an intense coldness emanating from Lily's room. Tiptoeing to her doorway, he peered inside. Standing over Lily's bed was a figure. It was tall, unnaturally so, and shrouded in a darkness that seemed to absorb the moonlight from the window. It had no discernible features, just a towering, menacing presence. As David took a step into the room, his foot creaked on the floorboard. The figure turned its head slowly. It didn't have a face, but he felt an ancient, malevolent gaze lock onto him. Then, it simply dissolved, vanishing into nothing, leaving behind a chilling draft and a faint whisper that echoed in his mind, "Don't interfere." The next day, a terrified David installed a small camera in Lily's room, pointing at her bed. He needed proof he wasn't going insane. He spent the entire day on edge, waiting for nightfall. He finally fell into an exhausted sleep, waking up just as the sun rose. With trembling hands, he opened the camera footage on his laptop. He fast-forwarded through the hours. Everything was normal. Lily was sleeping peacefully, tossing and turning occasionally. He was about to close the laptop in relief when he saw it. Around 3 a.m., Lily's sleeping form became still. But then, a second shape, a darker, more solid version of her, seemed to rise out of her body. It sat up in bed, independent of the sleeping child, and slowly turned its head until it was staring directly into the camera lens. Thank you for listening. If these stories made you feel uneasy, remember that help is always available. You are not alone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next descent into the dark. Sleep well, if you can.